honeymoon in Hawaii sounds like a dream come true, right? Well, it became one couple's worst nightmare when they ended up abandoned at sea. That's right, Elizabeth Webster and Alexander Burkle spent their honeymoon in Hawaii back in 2021, and they are now plaintiffs in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. On their trip, they embarked on a 5-hour snorkeling tour with a company called Sail Maui. The couple spent roughly an hour at the first diving spot, and the lawsuit states that the water got more turbulent as they tried to swim back to their boat. And despite giving distress signals, the newlywed couple claims the boat sailed off, leaving them stranded in the ocean a half a mile away from land. 44 people went on that tour, and crew members allegedly performed 3 head counts before leaving the diving spot. The lawsuit says that 2 of those head counts came out to 42 people, with a third round incorrectly counting 44 people. The couple said they eventually reached the shore on a different island. This is one that tour guides warned could have shallow reefs. Luckily, local residents on that island helped them return to Maui safely. The couple is seeking $5 million in damages from the tour company, citing gross negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress. So, Brian, you think this couple has a strong case, or are they, out to sea with this lawsuit, so to speak?
Yeah, well, Jesse, in my mind, it's what happened on the boat when they were missing that really strengthens their case. As you mentioned, it's the counting. I would think it's just simple math. And if it's hard, well, you already don't have shoes on, so use your toes to count too. You get to 42 twice, and then you get to 44. Also, we're hearing that people actually said, hey, you're missing 2 people. So it comes down to industry standards and whether or not they followed it appropriately. But the simple fact that they just were missing, I mean, my wife is a master diver. I had to talk to her about this, and they're like, yeah, no, this is a pretty no-duh thing. You make sure you get it right, and you create the systems to make sure you always get it right so you don't have things like this. I think it's a slam dunk case. I don't think we're going to ever see this at trial. I think they're going to settle before it even gets there.
Terry, any defenses that the tour company can assert in this case?
Very few. I think Brian's right. It is a good case for them. But I think some of the defenses, look, there are 2 causes of action here. One is gross negligence. The other is intentional infliction of emotional distress. No question, gross negligence. I mean, it means they were reckless and they had disregard for their lives, basically. And I think that the couple will be able to show that. The other is a little bit more difficult, but it's one of my favorite torts, intentional infliction of emotional distress. That means it's based on the wording, intentional. They had to intentionally leave them out there and cause their emotional distress. No doubt they're going to be able to show they have emotional distress. They'll have to have medical records, etc. And I think it's easy to show that it caused that distress, but was it intentional? I'm sure they didn't mean to leave them there.
Well, I think here's the important thing to remember. This is, a terrible situation for them. Thank goodness they're okay, because this could have ended up much worse than we're reporting right now. And in North Carolina is facing several charges, including reckless driving after almost hitting 2 children with his car. Take a look at this very scary video. They started to cross the street to the bus when the car speeds towards them, swerving at the very last second to miss them. North Carolina State Highway Patrol arrested Joshua Graham Paget Jr. just days after the near miss. Police say not only was Paget charged with reckless driving and passing a stopped school bus, but he's also facing a charge for driving with a revoked license. That is not good. And when we come back, a rap concert in New York leaves 2 people dead and 1 fighting for her life. How on earth did this happen? We're breaking down what we know so far. Back, everybody. We finish off today's show in Rochester, New York, where a hip-hop concert on Sunday night ended in a deadly stampede. Memphis rappers Glorilla and Finesse 2 Times hosted the show at Rochester's Main Street Armory. The venue can hold up to 5,000 guests in their main event space, and after the artists wrapped up their performance, guests suddenly started to surge towards the venue exits. 2 women died from the stampede, and a 3rd woman remains hospitalized in critical condition. 7 other people were treated for non-threatening life injuries. Glorilla said in a tweet that she's, quote, devastated and heartbroken for the victims in Sunday's incident. On Monday, local officials held a press conference to provide more details on the investigation.
There are some reports that shots were heard, causing the crowd to panic, but that has not been confirmed. We do not have any evidence of gunshots being fired or of anyone being shot or stabbed at the scene. Investigators from Patrol Section Investigations are currently assigned to this to investigate the incident to not only determine what happened, but to bring accountability to those who were culpable for last night's tragedy. We are hearing many reports of potential causes, including possibly crowd size, shots fired, pepper spray, and other contributing factors. Our investigators are interviewing surviving victims, other concert goers, security, and anyone else that has potential information as to what led to the tragedy last night. We are working with the City Fire Marshal's office to help determine the number of concert goers related to the capacity of the venue. In addition, we are working with various other licensing agencies such as Code Enforcement, the New York State Liquor Authority, and Corporation Counsel to verify compliance with regulatory safety measures and to hold those who were not in compliance accountable for their actions.
Terry, this is a terrible, terrible situation. I got to ask, criminal charges imminent?
I think it's possible. I don't think it's probable. You have to find a person who failed to assess the risk. Now, you could pin it on some one person, and then you could have criminal negligence, and of course, someone died here, so you could have criminally negligent homicide in New York, and it's a Class E felony, and it's 1 to 5 years. But there are just so many people involved here. I think it would be very difficult to point to one person. Obviously, whoever is in control of the crowd is one person they could point the finger to. I see this more as a civil case versus a criminal case. But if law enforcement really wants to send a message, they will look for that one person who really was in charge and should have been able to control that scene, and obviously failed to do so in this instance.
Well, Brian, that's the question, right? Who's at fault? It feels like everybody's going to be pointing the finger at everybody else for what ultimately happened.
All right, so Jesse, if you and our viewers are familiar with the whole Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other, that's basically what's going to happen in a civil case. Whoever was running the venue is going to point the finger at who owned the venue and who let people in. Is it a question of, did they have too many people come in? Did they serve them too much alcohol? Did they conform to the rules and regulations of having this many people at a venue? You can look at the alcohol servers, the venue owners, the people who promoted the event. You could probably, even if we've seen in the past, go and attack the people who actually were performing at the venue. That's an option as well. And all of those people who are going to have their fingers pointed at them, in order to minimize their liability, they're going to start pointing fingers at other people who are also getting their fingers pointed. That's where the whole Spider-Man pointing of the fingers back and forth. But really, I think the major question before we start asking where fingers are going to get pointed at is, what is the cause? Is it a gunshot? Is it pepper spray? I mean, that brings in issues of itself, but the people obviously who brought any kind of contraband that sparked this stampede are going to be at fault. But then, of course, the question becomes again, well, what was security like? How are you able to bring in these items? So no matter who we point the finger to, I think there are then going to be multiple people that we continue to point the finger at. And at the end of the day, I mean, I'm more criminal guy than I am civil. I hope that Terry's agreeing with me. It all comes down to us, the biggest pockets. The people who are victims here are going to go after the people who have the most money, because that's how they're going to find themselves whole at the end of the day.
Brian, Terry, I think you wrapped that up. You know, it's just a sad situation, but clearly it's just the beginning of something next. Brian, Terry, thank you both so much. Everyone out there, thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We're going to see you next time as we discuss justice in America.